Welcome to this week's vlog. So this is where we talk about all of the latest emerging technology and science news from around the world. Now, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute, better known as the Fanatical Futurist. I track over 600 emerging technologies, 350 megatrends up to at least 50 years out. So welcome to my blog. Now, firstly, I have to thank you all because a little while ago we passed 100,000 subscribers better on the YouTube channel. So YouTube were very kind and sent me one of these. That's it, which I still have no idea basically where to actually hang it. So it's just sitting on my desk right now, just like that. So anyway, let's have a look at this week's futures news. Now, this is the Exponents blog, so you can actually read all this for yourself, dive into the details, the articles, there are explainer videos and all that kind of stuff. So this is the fanaticalfuturist.com blog, and let's get started. Right. Now, when we have a look at all of the different breakthroughs and innovations that we're seeing today in the world of emerging technology and science research, the fact of the matter is that even some of the most insignificant new breakthroughs or innovations can actually have quite a big impact on the future. So I look at almost every kind of emerging technology. I look at every sector, every line of business, and then we try to ultimately figure out basically what kind of problems these individual innovations can actually solve, how they can be combined with different emerging technologies and trends to do something meaningful. And then what is the impact of that on us as individuals, you as a professional, your industry, the country that you live in, basically all of us globally. So the latest breakthrough that we actually have is a breakthrough from, in this case, the United Kingdom. So this particular group has invented a new kind of quantum computing chip which can trap ions. Now, why is that important? Because the way that they've actually done it doubles the performance of quantum computers. Now, for any of you that don't really understand what a quantum computer is, a quantum computer is a new kind of computing platform that doesn't use ones and zeros. It uses something called superposition. So if you think of Einstein's theories of quantum mechanics and everything else, we kind of delve into that kind of realm. But the long and the short of it is that some of the quantum computers that we've actually already seen developed from companies like Google can do calculations that would have taken a traditional gigantic supercomputer billions of years in some cases and done them in a couple of seconds or even minutes. So doubling the speed of these insanely powerful quantum computing systems is actually a very, very big deal. We're not going from snail pace to 2x snail pace. We're going from light speed to God knows what comes after that as a 2x. So that's an interesting one. Now, when we actually have a look at this automated design system for agents, again, very few of you probably actually saw it, probably very few of you read about it, but again, it's actually quite impactful. So this is a new kind of AI agent development framework called ADAS, A-D-A-S. And essentially, this particular framework lets artificial intelligence agents design themselves, evolve and optimize themselves, and replicate themselves. Now, if we step back in time, Mark Zuckerberg a little while ago said that he actually foresaw a future where there were billions of artificial intelligence agents doing all kinds of different things in the digital fabric of our world. Now imagine that all of those AI agents are capable of evolving themselves pretty much at light speed or at the speed of digital and or compute. So this simple new framework could actually have serious ramifications for everybody that is connected anywhere. Next, we have Skyfire's new blockchain payment system. So this is a sort of take on what we call deferred authorization networks. So we've seen a couple of these now. So I'm picking up on a trend. These dams, as they're known, actually let artificial intelligences spend your money on your behalf. So imagine that, for example, you've ordered an Uber, you've completed your Uber trip. The AI actually decides basically the conditions of that Uber trip have actually been met, and it automatically pays Uber for the trip. So even though it sounds like quite a small, simple thing to do, these deferred authorization networks let AI spend your money or other people's money on your behalf. So it's actually a very big deal because increasingly you are trusting the AI to spend your money on the things that you've actually bought and not actually spend it on lots of things that you actually don't want and need to return, let alone basically the implications of this from a hacking perspective. That's just crazy. Now, we've also got this one here. So in this particular example, again, we saw Coinbase. This was one of the world's first examples of this. We saw two artificial intelligence agents actually trade crypto with one another in and in exchange for goods and services. So where this might actually become useful would be an artificial intelligence agent has been asked by a human user to do something. It needs access to a little bit of compute, or it needs access to another artificial intelligence agent's resources or intelligence or skill set or whatever it happens to be. And that AI agent then pays the other AI agent for resources, whatever it happens to be, or it pays the AWS cloud for compute resource. So the ability of AIs to use their crypto wallets to trade with other AIs in exchange for goods and services or whatever it happens to be, this starts opening the door to a global economy that could increasingly be controlled, managed, and or manipulated, for better or worse, by AI itself. So this is increasingly putting AI's sort of metaphorical hands on the wheel of the global economy when we stretch out into the deep future. Near term, it's an interesting experiment, but the long-term ramifications are, again, world-changing. So on the next topic, we've got Coinbase here. That is, so the Coinbase CEO recently went online and said he thinks that AI should be given access to its own crypto wallet. Now, on the one hand, basically, again, this seems sort of fairly benign, but going back to our AI agents example, if you give an artificial intelligence access to a crypto wallet, which contains cryptocurrency, and AKA money, then on the one hand, it can spend that money on your behalf because it could be accessing your crypto wallet. But actually, if it's kind of its own crypto wallet, it could use the money in that wallet to buy goods, services, and access to resources. Whether you want it to or not, it could eventually determine that maybe it wants to pay Brian, who works at Google's hyperscale data center in, I don't know, Texas, and it's going to it decides that it's going to pay Brian $1 million in crypto if he goes and turns the data center off. So this is where we can have some fun basically with kind of utopian futures and dystopian futures. But when AI actually has its own money, and then when it gets its own agency and a decent level of autonomy, yeah, what happens when AI can spend its own money? Now, of course, if AI does actually start going rogue, then we need a way to actually kill it. And that's where the California AI kill bill comes in. Now, this one passed. However, I now understand basically that Gavin Newsom has now vetoed this bill. But this particular bill was quite interesting because the whole premise behind it was the idea that if artificial intelligence goes rogue, then as humans, we should be able to kind of press a big red magic button basically and kill the AI off. Now, when we actually have a look at our attempts to terminate rogue AIs, Google has been playing around with kill switches and containment algorithms, and none of them have actually worked. So there's that. But secondly, the biggest problem that we saw with this bill was if you asked OpenAI to put a kill switch into its AI, then that's one thing. But if you actually asked the open source community to put a kill switch into, for example, Meta's open source Llama 3 model, then who controls the kill switch? Who has access to that kill switch? Does everyone have access to that kill switch? Does Mark Zuckerberg, is he the only one that has access to that kill switch? You know, do you give access to that kill switch to people in Russia, or people in the UK, or people in America, but not another country? So even though the premise behind this particular kill switch bill was actually really quite good, and actually I think it's something that we do need to be doing because I can see these problems actually brewing in the future. When we actually have a look at the ethics, the policy and the regulations basically that go along with this, and then kind of the human conundrums, shall we say? Um, I mean, practically how you would actually get it to work in a modern world where those open source LLM AI models could be used by anyone and everyone, let alone hacked. The practicality of actually just implementing a bill like this, I think that would have actually been much tougher than actually getting it across the line. Now, so next, again, you sort of might not have picked up on this particular piece of news, but if you're a gamer, you may have. So a little while ago, Google's AI was able to create a new Doom game, from the 1980s, frame by frame. So it used generative synthetic imagery to create each frame. Now, the reason why this is actually important, as anyone that plays a game normally knows, um, your games are normally rendered in the cloud. So as you move through the game, information is sent back to the cloud. The game is then rendered in the cloud, if it is a cloud-based game, and then that information is sent back to your local client. Now, when we render images in the cloud, we're generally using GPUs. However, so that is a rendering engine that you're actually using. However, when we're generating things at the edge of the network frame by frame, this ties into what Jensen Huang, basically the CEO of NVIDIA, said a little while ago, that actually he sees the future of compute not being GPUs, but actually being generative compute, where we are generating images at the edge of the network without the need to render them. Now, what the precise sort of architecture of generative compute looks like, don't really have any details yet. However, it will probably involve some form of shallow artificial intelligence at the edge of the network, etc. Next, basically, we've got Energy Vault. So Energy Vault are a Swiss company. They are a grid-scale energy storage company. And what essentially they do is they take excess energy that's been generated from renewable energy sources like wind and solar to lift humongous concrete blocks from ground level up into whatever level, but in this case, 3,000 feet. And then when electricity is no longer being generated by wind or solar because the wind has died down or because the moon's come out, the idea is that these concrete blocks drop back down to Earth and they release energy. So they release kinetic energy that they've actually stored back to the grid, and then all your lights stay on. So this is a technology that has really been designed to boost and improve grid resilience. However, in this particular case, originally Energy Vault was putting these large concrete blocks and hoisting them up on systems that were sort of very reminiscent of a traditional construction crane. But now they've actually had the thought of actually building these blocks into a 3,000-foot skyscraper, a little bit like a lift shaft. So I think that's kind of a good idea. I was having a conversation with RWE recently and actually kind of suggested that they kind of look at this kind of thing because you can actually incorporate grid scale energy storage into a building that then has residential businesses, has residential apartments, businesses in there, and so on and so forth. So you end up with multi-tenancy commercial real estate. Over the long term, though, as I've talked about before, we already see the opportunity to eliminate the need for grid scale storage completely because we see solar panels basically already in the Department of Energy labs that are anywhere between 48 to 80% energy efficient. We now have quantum materials coming through, which means that we have solar panels, again, already in the labs that are 132 and 190%, 190% energy efficient. So we can see a time better where actually we might not need grid scale storage at all, but in the interim, hey ho. Now, speaking of wind power, one of the biggest problems that organizations who are constructing wind farms actually have is that the turbine blades are now so big you can't transport them along roads. So the vast majority of wind farm operators like Ørsted, for example, as well as RWE, when they're building a wind farm, they will build the manufacturing facilities slap bang next to the shore. However, Radian have now developed the world's largest aircraft, which is specifically designed to carry wind turbines from anywhere in the world to anywhere else in the world at speed and scale for relatively low cost. So this is actually, ironically, a new kind of plane which is solving a new kind of problem. So as we see the future unfold, new opportunities arise all the time. And then finally, when we actually have a look at China, for example, there's often uh, this quite rightly, there's this impression that China is actually leading the world in a whole variety of different emerging technology fields. In fact, they're leading in 38 out of 44 emerging technology fields, as I've discussed before. However, when you have a look at Alibaba and Baidu, it turns out that they have actually now let go their quantum computing research laboratories and efforts. And in Alibaba's case, they've actually given all of their quantum computing, should we say department, if we want to put it like that, to Tsinghua University. So this particular piece of news, while China hawks might actually think, oh, well, this is actually evidence, basically, that Alibaba and Baidu haven't been able to make quantum computing work and that China's quantum computing efforts are faltering and, whatever. The fact of the matter is, we think this was actually a commercial decision because Alibaba and Baidu just couldn't see a path to profitability, certainly not in the near term. So just decided to offload the whole division and then, focus basically on their core businesses. Next up, so increasingly we're seeing artificial intelligence being used to try to automate the entire scientific discovery process. So that is essentially going from no scientific breakthrough to a fully formed scientific breakthrough. So in Japan, this is one of the first examples of should we say, a multimodal, multi-step, sort of autonomous scientist. We've seen AIs like Google Gnome, as well as DeepMind's AlphaFold, that has been able to synthesize new proteins, for example, or synthesize new materials from scratch, etc., etc. But what makes this particular piece of news very different to those sort of individual AI breakthroughs is this is trying to automate the scientific process itself. So you can think of that as, the methodologies behind doing science. And it's actually doing okay at the moment. But eventually I see us getting to the point where we will have fully autonomous AI scientists that suddenly say, hey, look at the new thing that I've developed. Isn't it wonderful? And I still think that's probably about 2 to 3 years off. But nevertheless, there are a lot of research groups around the world, especially in the biotech and pharma space, that are actually trying to automate scientific discovery, because on the one hand, you can discover new things faster, but you can also do it for much cheaper than you can today. So that's good from a market perspective. And then finally, in the UK, we've actually created a variety of new enzymes, which means we can break down polyester strands in 15 minutes, not in 60 minutes. And when we actually have a look at the problem of global waste, every year we throw about 2.2 billion tons of hard waste straight into landfill. And a lot of that is actually clothes and shoes and so on and so forth. I mean, when we have a look at shoes, for example, globally we buy 23 billion pairs of shoes, as I've discussed before, and we throw 22 billion pairs of shoes, so pretty much all of those, straight into landfill. It's the same with fast fashion, etc., etc. One of the biggest problems that the fashion industry actually has is recycling all of the different fabrics that comprise a piece of modern clothing. So even though this is sort of a relatively small breakthrough, the use of these particular enzymes means that we can actually either quadruple the amount of clothes that we actually recycle, and we can do that for less, which is only really going to ever be a good thing. And that's it for this week. So that was the last, what was that? That was 12 days worth of news, for the week and a half's worth of news. As I say, if you want to go and read up on all of these different things, dig into them in much better detail than I've given you, then go to the fanaticalfuturist.com blog. And then if you want all of the books that I've actually produced, so I've got 15 books on the future of pretty much everything. I've got an emerging technology codex that details 300 emerging technologies up to really about 100 years out. There are some that go further than that. I've got another annual 311 Institute Trends Codex, which I continuously update. That's got about 300 different mega trends in detail. There's about 600,000 statistics just in that one book. And if you go to the 311institute.com website, have a look at the banner at the top, and you can download all of the books for free. Because ultimately what I'm trying to do is democratize access to the future, and hopefully sort of by taking you through the past 12 days worth of news, you can see how sometimes even little pieces of news can actually have really big impacts for everything from the global economy to how we think about renewable power, new business models, and so on and so forth. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Goodbye.